I think you guys know how much I love Atari. I'm sure my Atari shelf speaks for itself. I've got an assortment of Atari games from the 2600 to the Jaguar that I've collected over the course of several years. And in that time I've been adding a lot of games to this extensive library and playing them when I can. I played a lot of the best and worst because not even Atari was perfect, and one of the first signs of failure came when they released their version of Pac-Man to their video computer system. Hold on to your fever, because you're about to get heat stroke when you see this garbage. Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. In 1980, former Atari coin-op president Joe Robbins met with Japanese arcade company Namco and would come out with the home console licensing rights to their latest arcade game, Pac-Man. This deal almost cost Robbins his job, as it was not only unsanctioned, but the game itself had yet to be released. Luckily for him and Atari, the deal would pay off when Pac-Man became the biggest phenomena the video game world had seen up to that point, when released on May 22nd in Japan and October 10th in North America. With revenue coming in faster than Pac-Man could eat pellets, Atari quickly got to work on making a home port for their video computer system. Designer Todd Fry was assigned to bring the smash hit to the VCS, and that was easier said than done, as Atari game cartridges would be a significant downgrade compared to the superior capabilities the arcade had. But usually Atari had a good track record of replicating the arcade to an extent, and in the meantime marketed their port hard, dumping $1.5 million in an advertising campaign. And after 2 years and a lot of hype later, the world's newfound sickness was given Atari's version of Pac-Man. This port was released on March 16th, 1982, 2 years after the original arcade and actually 3 weeks before the supposed release date. You see, Atari was hyping April 3rd as the release date, dubbing it National Pac-Man Day, but for one reason or another, went ahead and released it 3 weeks early. Fever waits for no release date. I'm pretty sure nobody complained though when they saw this on the shelves and bought it, but when they got to play it, that's what we'll be talking about today, so let's go ahead and take a better look at Atari's Pac-Man. Oh, hello again. Usually we would jump straight into the gameplay, but I feel like I have to start off by putting this into perspective. It was 1982. You just got this game for your Atari VCS or Sears Tele-Games. You take out the cartridge, put it in the slot, and turn it on to see this. You look stunned. You shake your head. You turn it off and back on again to see if you've gone crazy. It's still there. You rub your eyes to make sure you're not going blind, and turn it off and back on again one last time. And then it hits you. Reality checks in. Oh God, why? 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 Why did they do it, doggy? Why did they do it? My God, have you ever seen such a sad display of pixels? There's a lot to dive into, so let's start with the most obvious. Pac-Man has an eye. Now he can look at Ms. when he's making love. Or look at the ghost come right at him when he's playing Plus. Pac-Man looks like Pac-Man. At least they didn't screw that up. Everything else? Ooh boy. The ghosts are the most obvious mess you couldn't miss as they flicker all over the damn place. They're all the same color from the look of it, so they don't have a real identity other than being the Ghost Quartet, and sometimes you might not even see all the ghosts on screen. The manual says they're most likely on top of each other. When you're playing something that looks like a turd, you'd be consulting the manual too. The turd I refer to is of course the maze. The board is horizontal instead of vertical, which gets a pass because that's how home TVs would work. It'd be weird if you tried to play it sideways. Too bad they didn't figure out vertical scrolling that would be a part of the Junior Pac-Man port, though it was missing in the Ms. Pac-Man port. But I'm sure when Atari compared Pac-Man to Ms. that would come out the same year, they must have thought, it looks like shit. That's apparent. But to its credit, it still plays like Pac-Man. You can go about Maze Land eating dots. Or no, excuse me. Video wafers, so says the manual. Why, I don't know. Something about nutritional needs. You've got regular wafers as well as these wafers that look bigger, but I theorize are just two regular sized wafers next to each other, as you could eat half of one and the other half remains. A double wafer it is not. Energizers or power pills are present on each corner of the maze, and that makes it sound like Pac-Man's got an addiction. Of course, when you eat the power pills, the ghost will turn to a shade of blue, which you can go after and eat for extra bonuses. I think I made a startling realization. Those aren't power pills. They're bath salts. In case you were wondering, the point values for many things are drastically reduced, being divided by 10 or 100 evenly. The biggest point reduction is that of the bonus food, which in this game takes the form of a vitamin. Gotta get your daily dose of vitamins. Though I wouldn't call that a vitamin, but more like a square pizza, the kind of pizza that has another name that I don't remember. But that is the only bonus food you'll get throughout the game. It'll appear and disappear every now and then in every level, so you'll have to keep an eye out for it when trying to do everything else, including not dying, because if you get hit by any of the ghosts when you haven't consumed a power pill, you'll lose a life. Lose all your lives and the game will be over, thankfully for some, I imagine. But you can try and escape death easily by juking them out or using the escape routes on either the top or bottom to loop back around, where they would usually be on the side. There are a couple of glitches in the game that involve the escape routes, but you'll probably have to toggle with the difficulty switches to get them to work perfectly. In Game 2, if you follow this pattern that I'm doing right now, it will somehow cause the ghost to continually go through the escape routes and repeating that process until the end of the level. And in Game 3, if you mess around inside the tunnels by shaking the joystick up and down, you'll somehow be able to phase through walls. Almost like a broken debug mode almost. And I'm sure when the Atari debuggers figured these out, they were like, but that probably didn't happen because debuggers didn't exist yet. So yeah, that is basically how you play this crapshoot of a Pac-Man game. But I'll be honest with y'all, it may look bad, and I've played it on and off before this review for years, and I never really found it to be that terrible. I'm serious, I actually enjoyed it for what it's worth. I remember playing it at the NVM at their little display one time. I went a good while without dying too, and it was actually quite enjoyable. I don't know what it is, maybe I have weird tastes, but I figured it to be it's what it was for back then and I just accepted it for what it is. Many others who got it when it was new thought the same way, I assure you. But there were those who didn't either. Atari anticipated their version to be a hit, whether it was on par or not. So they made an excess amount of Pac-Man cartridges, about 12 million total, more than how many Atari VCSs were in homes at the time. Their thought process was, since Pac-Man was so popular, that those that already have an Atari Video Computer System will buy it, and that those who don't will purchase a VCS so they can play Pac-Man. Not gonna lie, that is a solid strategy on paper, and it seemed to work somewhat as the game did sell into the millions, but not as much as Atari had hoped. As much as Pac-Man did sell, it also got returned. Many consumers were not impressed and got refunds. most likely in quarters so they could play the arcade version. Critics also didn't favor the game either, calling it awful, disappointing. One even referred to it as Flickerman. Even with poor reception, the game was still able to make a profit. The real question on everybody's mind was what went wrong.
A lot of things. A lot of things. Need more medicine.
Most would be quick to blame the designer Todd Fry, but any programmer of the time would tell you this was a tall order. Fry had to put the game into a 4 kilobyte ROM cartridge, compared to the arcade game which was able to run on a Zilog Z80 CPU, which could support up to 64 kilobytes of memory. Already a great downgrade. Todd Fry knew himself he had to compensate for what he had, so he had to make some decisions. Already not being provided any design specs of the original arcade game to work off of, Fry had to literally figure out how the game worked by playing one and recreating it from scratch. And he did with 80 hours of work every week over a tight 6-month development cycle. Of those decisions Fry made, he decided it was important to have a 2-player mode which would take up nearly a fourth of the cartridge's memory. He was forced to change the color scheme due to in part of a policy with Atari that said only space games could have black backgrounds. And due to the strict development schedule, Fry was unable to implement a flicker management system to address the big ghost problem, not only because of time, but because Atari executives didn't seem to mind at all. Yeah, Atari hadn't a care in the world that there was this flicker problem, which is amazing to think that a company would do such a thing to perhaps their greatest licensing opportunity they had ever gotten at the time.
And also during Atari's hurry to release this game in 1982, it may be possible that the final product was a prototype. Yeah, you heard that right. Pac-Man on Atari is a prototype. A POC. POC. Proof of concept.
There isn't any real evidence to back up what I'm stating other than a few stories about a potential early limited release during the holiday season of 1981, but it sure is an interesting theory. However, that doesn't excuse Atari's lack of care or quality control, which is what most consumers and critics would later cite in their complaints. Atari lost a good amount of trust in the market, which would come back to haunt them later on. Todd Fry remembers not having any negative feedback about the game until it was released. He figured what were they expecting and said he could have done better with an 8 kilobyte cart. Though I would argue if he had more time, knowledge, and without a stupid-ass policy, he could have gotten closer to the homebrews we see today, and they run on 4 kilobyte carts. Jesus Christ, they didn't even know the potential big picture with what little they had. However, what we have here is what we got now, and for not being the best looking, I applaud Todd Fry for what he was able to do. He made it play like Pac-Man and thought about the player. For not being his first choice of project, he would have rather done Defender, he made it work with what he was able to do, and he has no regrets. Good on him. Atari, on the other hand, still made the effort to right this wrong, saying this game differed slightly from the original. Certainly didn't look the case from the box art, though you could have seen exactly what you were purchasing on the back. In fact, it could have potentially been way different if you've seen the unused art from the book Art of Atari.
This is kids' nightmare material.
Though I will stand by what I say when I say this. If given the chance, the game can be fun. Forget that it was a downright downgrade to the arcade. Back then, technology at home wasn't the same as tech in the arcade. You had to appreciate what you had, and I'd say that stands to reason with this game. Obviously, it isn't my favorite version of Pac-Man. The original isn't even my favorite type of Pac-Man. But from time to time, I will play it and enjoy it as it was what it was. Though I will admit I prefer the sounds of the homebrew over the sounds of this game.
If I wasn't deaf already, I am now. I mean, sure, it has a tiny bit of tunes, but would you really consider this music? I didn't think so. Next!
So we've established that Atari's Pac-Man isn't all the way like Pac-Man. Atari must have realized that too, to an extent, and decided to throw in some additional game types. There are 8 different game variations. Some will affect Pac-Man speed and also the ghost speed in some form. Games 3 and 7 are recommended for young children, which is what that special featured teddy bear is alluding to. Plus, Game 6 is supposedly the most challenging. So take that as you will. The difficulty switches will determine how long the power pills and vitamins stay on screen. And I should mention again, every game type has a 2-player mode. If you can get somebody else to play with you, that'd be an achievement of yours. Believe me, I tried.
Come on, Cody, I'll take you to the arcade and I won't leave you this time.
Oh, and you can play this game in black and white if you wanted. Pac-Man going posh. While not being the Pac-Man everybody expected, the game still went on to become the best-selling game on the Atari 2600, selling more than 7 million of the 12 million made. To put it in perspective, that's 3 million more than the second bestseller ever, Pitfall, and it also made Todd Fry a millionaire in royalties. Atari would continue to dish out more ports to their later systems with the 5200 and 8-bit computers, both of which being superior. Probably could have made up for the 2600 port if more people played those systems. This 2600 port didn't stop the fever from continuing to spread as it was ported elsewhere by Atari under Atari Soft, and more sequels and merchandise were made, meaning more money under the sun. Over the years, Pac-Man has been released on just about every gaming device imaginable and has become the most recognizable video game character next to Mario. This version was only a minor bruise on the legacy, though it is cited as the start of the 1983 video game crash and Atari's decline overall. And I can see why. Consumers could have went on to go play a clone since this was of poor quality, and I'll tell ya, they weren't in short supply.
So, what is my rate to play?
With all the hoopla surrounding this port, it wasn't going to satisfy everyone, but nobody was expecting how bad it would be or become. Pac-Man on the Atari Video Computer System was a misguided attempt to capitalize on Pac-Man fever that seemed never-ending, and it turned out they nearly put a stop to it, and maybe video games in general. I'll still say it's a fun game if given the chance, but I certainly understand why most consider it dreadful. While it plays close to the arcade, it certainly looks nothing like it. Though that came down to the technical aspects of the time, and many accepted it and had a good time playing it, others found it to be not what was promised. A lot of bad surrounded this game, but some good came out of it too. Better management and quality control would be enforced by Nintendo when gaming was back on the resurgence, but it would take several more years before those strict policies would be more lenient. With the many ups and downs it caused during its release, it made an impact on the industry for better and for worse. It was an important and probably a necessary step forward to bring about change in how games were made and perceived at home. But in this case, what you saw then is what you see now. An important port in gaming history, despite all its shortcomings, could be just as fun as having hay fever.
To conclude, I give this port a play rate of... should play.
But that's only my opinion. If you have your own thoughts, leave a comment. If you like what you see, leave a like. If you think others would enjoy this, share it around the web. And if you want to see more, subscribe. Anyway, this is BrianTheBlue Game Reviews, Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. Ryan here saying thanks for watching my game review. You can find me elsewhere like on Co-op.com where me and my friends play through various games for you to see. We do Let's Plays and weekly shows, having fun and getting frustrated in the process. Subscribe today to see what we play next in the coming weeks. Plus, I'm a part of the Millennial X channel. Me and my arcade buddies also love our fair share of gaming, plus goofing around with video topics or each other when we can. We play games, hunt games, and soon review games, movies, and console generations. Change the channel and check us out when you're able. But don't forget, I have plenty of other content on this channel with original series like quick views, console reviews, AC reviews, and current calamities. From software to hardware, I provide any and all gaming reviews. Check out Jacobians further to see what I have to offer. That's all the promotion from me. Click the I to go watch either the previous or upcoming episodes of Game Reviews.
Freaking dreams.